right, good evening, everybody. We have had a little bit of break while the TV station gets organized in there. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs Committee meeting to order. It is 8:03. We have one item on our agenda. Order number 23-108-721D, communication from Mayor Vigent regarding a veto of the City Council order of 22-23-108-721C. Ordinance amendments to Chapter 650 zoning relative to certain provisions concerning mixed use and affordable housing. We do have a letter from the mayor that I will read. Honorable President Ossing and councilors, I am hereby notifying you of my veto of City Council Order 2022-23-108-721C, proposed zoning ordinance amendments regarding mixed use and affordable housing. The proposed language is placing added restrictions and will not only prohibit downtown development, but all housing developments within the city. Developers that are including affordable units need to make up the cost somewhere to make it lucrative in order to build residential or mixed use with residential, which would require more units or higher rents. If you increase the percentage of affordable units for larger projects, you are ultimately driving up the cost of the project and the rental prices for the market rate units. There are already approved projects downtown that are not subject to these new affordable unit requirements, and they have not been constructed. Currently, a studio apartment is averaging $1,800. One bedrooms are $1,800 to $2,500, and two bedrooms are $2,500 to $3,000 per month. The majority of Marlborough's beautiful historic homes have been turned into multifamily units. Although affordable, these units are not allowed to be included in our subsidized housing inventory list. Persons from out of Marlborough who hold a Section 8 voucher can apply for the lottery. Section 8 voucher holders are getting subsidized rent. 30% of their income goes toward rent, and the rest is subsidized by HUD Federal, and can apply for an affordable unit in Marlborough. There is not always a guarantee that a Marlborough resident will get preference due to other variables. Minority, disability, larger households receive priority. Note, at the time of writing this letter, there are 6 Marlborough residents who received preference out of 20 applications. The local preference information is superseded by adjustments in the local preference pool, which is page 17 of the Affordable Housing Lottery Information Packet for the Green District, that reads, which I am not going to read because it's rather lengthy. It is, I believe, on the website in the agenda today. Before adopting these changes, information about the demand for new units and how it will affect new construction in our community should be reviewed. There's an ongoing lottery process for the new affordable units at the borough that concludes in April. The City of Marlborough's affordable housing stock continues to exceed the 10% threshold under 40B requirements. I recently met with President Ossing and Urban Affairs Chair Roby to ask them to put the proposed zoning ordinance amendment on hold until we finalize the compliance with the MBTA community zoning law that Solicitor Grossfield is working on, and we plan on sending down in the coming weeks. This law has its own limits on how many affordable units can be required. Although these goals may be admirable, these proposed changes for mixed use and affordable housing will be detrimental to all development and in opposition of what we have all worked toward achieving. I'm hopeful that we can further our discussion and am available for any questions. Sincerely, Arthur Vigent, Mayor, and the mayor is here. If you would like to come into the well as he's coming up, I would just like to comment that, yes, I did meet with the mayor, with President Ossing. My understanding at the time was that the 3A piece was totally separate. I had written a proposed language for the code. It was running up against a time frame. I wasn't worried about the 3A. I just wanted some questions answered. So I apologize to the mayor if he thought there was that I was pushing this through rather than wait for the 3A. We all voted on this on March 13th with a suspension because that was the date that it had to be voted on. The vote was 11-0 with the ordinance change, just as a reminder to everybody. So we're here to listen to the mayor's comments, ask questions, and make a decision, I guess.
Well,
so,
first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come down and talk to you tonight. And I want to assure you that neither Councilor Roby nor the president made any assurance that this was going to wait until after the MBTA. I had made the suggestion, but there was no commitment from either one of them to do that. So it wasn't like they changed somewhere along the way. But I think the intent here is obviously something that a lot of you have talked about affordable housing in the city and throughout the state, maybe throughout the country. I know less about the rest of the country, but it's obviously a big issue around here. Our affordable housing units based on 40B and Section 8 is 24, I want to say $2,400 or $2,700 per month for a Section 8 unit, of which the tenant only pays 30% of that. So what we have found is some of the landlords are actually holding out for Section 8 tenants, because maybe the unit's only worth $2,500 a month, but if they wait for a Section 8 unit, they can get $2,700 a month. And they're not worried about the tenant, because the tenant's only paying 30% of their income, no matter what the rent is. The rest is being subsidized by the federal and state government. This program a little different. The units are discounted, and the people pay the discounted rate. You know, there's LIP programs that we have gotten into in the past. It's just one of the things I just wanted to be clear about is I do plan on coming down with the MBTA zoning, hopefully at the next meeting, to send to committee and have you discuss it and make recommendations that you have on changes. And I have included in that 10% affordable component. And I think we have it laid out so Marlborough as a city won't get burnt like some other communities that are really digging their feet in and not going to be cooperating on this. My feeling is let's see if we can make it work, get it approved quickly, because the next step isn't due for a while, but let's get it behind us and move forward. It also allows us to get in again for the MassWorks grant, where I think if they're going to start kind of holding this as a carrot and a stick type thing and not allowing us to apply for some of these grants without having an approved MBTA zone, my feeling is let's figure out how to make it work and get something done so we can continue in the future working toward these programs. One of the big issues that I had with making the change the way it is kind of handcuffing the future councils. And I guess sitting upstairs, I should really not care what happens on the council level, and you know, whatever you guys approve for each other, then that's up to you. But being down here for a number of years, if there are changes that need to be made for a development, and they come in on a regular basis, an attorney comes in and wants to do a development, first thing he has to do is change an ordinance or change the zoning. This would kind of handcuff the future councils where they wouldn't be able to give relief to a project that maybe is real important to them. And I use the Lincoln Street project as the example because my feeling is that's a really, really important project for the city of Marlborough. It's been something that's talked about for probably 40, 50 years now, and we finally put it together with your help, and I want to thank you for that. But that's one that it was less important from my standpoint to get the affordable units than it was to get a good project done for the neighborhood and for the city. And if some relief needed to be given from the council, I want to make sure that you have the ability to give that relief if you see fit to do that. I don't have the ability to do it from the fourth floor. That's your decision. And we just went through the, the 57 Main Street, which was, there's, disagreement by different councilors for different reasons, but that was approved, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and I think, maybe we got it through a little too quickly and didn't think of all the ramifications that could come from the way it was laid out. And I think this might do the same thing. And I'd rather have a little more time taken and say what will work in the future for future projects and give you the ability to make that decision. Again, it's not being made from the fourth floor, it's being made from this body. DHCD basically sets a lot of these guidelines. They are our best friend and our worst enemy when it comes to this stuff. They have regulations that are in place that have been there forever that need to be changed. And it's like a third rail. It's like talking about changing Social Security in Washington. No one wants to talk about changing the affordable housing in Massachusetts, which is a problem. The way it's set up, it's a problem. They've never addressed how to change it. The 40B requirements that are in place really don't get people affordable housing that need it. I don't know if the answer is to lower that percentage way down, but make them real affordable housing for people to live in. I don't have the answer, but I know that DHCD won't touch it. They don't want to talk about it. We've been down there, I've been down there twice over the last 30 years that I've been sitting here to give proposals to DHCD on how to use some of the inner city housing to be included in our affordable housing stock. And neither time were they open to the recommendation. I'm hoping to try it one more time before I say my goodbyes, but it's just we have these affordable units all over the inner city that don't qualify for our 40B count. And we continue to be over the 10% and have been for a number of years. We're proud of that. We do need to keep that in mind when we move forward to make sure that that 10% stays in place. But again, picking and choosing, your discretion. Maybe one requires a 15% and you have all affordables included in that, all 15%, and maybe some can get by with a 12% number and you let some be bought out. Our DHC requirement for the local preference probably aggravated me more than most things, and to be honest with you, I had never read the statute or the requirements for local preference. And I was astonished to see that 33.4% of the Marlborough local preference has to be minorities. So if there's a minority from outside of Marlborough, they bump the person that's not a minority in Marlborough for the local preference, which is just completely wrong. So like I said, that's their requirements, and I have a big problem with that one. I know Councilor Ossing proposed some alternate language, and I think we're getting a lot closer with maybe something like that. If we're gonna do something going down that path, the state for a 40B project requires 20% affordable or 25% moderately affordable to qualify for a 40B project. Most of the projects have gone with the 25% moderately affordable, so the requirements are a little higher. Maybe we take those numbers and simply say we're going to take half that number. So to do any multifamily units over a certain number, I know there's been 8 and 20 mentioned, you have to be half of the state requirement. So it has to be 10% affordable or 12.5% moderately affordable. Please don't try to reinvent the wheel, because we don't have the people in place to monitor these things in the future. If we just use the state criteria, I know there's been discussion about changing the percentages and changing the income limits. It makes it very difficult as follow-up for the future, because eventually some of you that have been around for a while aren't gonna be here, and some are gonna forget what the requirements are. We went a number of years without collecting the money for the tower money that we get every year from a number of the telephone companies around, the wireless companies everywhere. We went a number of years. They owed us, you know, I don't know if you remember, was it $30,000 or $40,000? We realized they weren't sending it in. Some bills weren't going to the right places. No one was following up on it. And the biggest thing was, it wasn't my responsibility. We heard from a number of department heads. I think it was John Galone that was the public facilities director at the time, said, I'll deal with it. And after he, you know, worked with Tom Abel then, and ended up collecting all the money, then we finally said, it's your responsibility in the treasurer's office to collect that money. So it's just, some of these things don't get followed up on. We just had one with one of the marijuana companies that's doing a transfer that didn't give us the $10,000 a year. Again, it's just when these things are put in there and they go endlessly for year after year, it makes it difficult for the city to follow up on it. I'd rather have a big upfront number that goes into the general fund or a specific fund rather than the annual things. But keeping track of a separate set of affordable percentages or numbers, I think would be a future issue, not for me. The only other point that I want to make, and again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come down here, is when you approve this, think it through and get it right. And I know that's exactly what Councilor Ossing said in his letter, but I agree with him wholeheartedly. Get it right, because you don't want to be going back and looking at it in 6 months or a year, or when that first project comes in, that you want to change the rules for it because it's a special project, you know. And we don't have any of those on the books right now. We don't have any sitting on my desk that haven't come down to you, but that special project that maybe you've been working on for a while, that finally comes through, that you say, well, we need to make an exception here. This isn't giving you the ability to do that. And I want you to have an out if you need it. So that's those are my comments. Again, I think what you're trying to do is the right thing. I just don't know if this is the particular vehicle, the way it's done, to get it done. So thank you. I'll be glad to take any questions you have.
All right, so I know this did go to committee. It's sort of back here to have a discussion whether there's a sense that we would override the mayor's veto. I know everybody did receive the information from Councilor Ossing with his suggested edits. He is not a member of finance, but I think that if he wants to bring up his recommendation, we can let him bring that forward, and then we can see if anybody else has other questions, and just kind of see where everybody is. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, councilors, when I get a veto, you know, my first reaction is no, but part of the veto process is to take it in and actually think about, did we make the right decision? And it's not a bad thing, because last I checked, I don't make the right decisions all the time. You can ask Linda, she'll vouch for that. So I take the vetoes very seriously, and I try to go back and look and say, okay, what am I hearing and what did I miss? And I'll be candid, I missed on this one. And I hope you feel similarly when it comes time to vote on the veto. So after much internal deliberation and research over the last couple of weeks, I'm unable to support the council order that I did vote in favor for. But again, new information's come to light that I'm not going to be supporting this going forward, all right? And I will be supporting the mayor's veto, and let me tell you why. So increasing the number of affordable housing units will ultimately drive up the cost of the market rate. And I think, I try to say, how do I explain that simply? So if you've got 10 units and they're all rented for $1,000, but now I got to make 20% of them affordable, so say they're going to now be rented at $800, The other 8 units now have to be $1,200, because the developer's not gonna lose his money or her money on the project, right? It's just, it's math. It's not a bad thing, it's capitalism, it's okay. But remember, there is no free lunch in the process, right? Someone has to pay for it. So the council's under no deadline to approve the zoning change. We met our 90-day criteria. We now have a veto in place, and we have to act on the veto. If we override the veto, we start from scratch. That's not a bad thing. I highlight, get it right, don't get it to get something done. Who's pushing us right now to get it done? Is there somebody that's got to have it done? No, we want to get it done the right way. And I think that ultimately is what, as councilors, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. The elements, well, let me keep going. So one of my goals is I always wanted to make sure the city maintains that, at least that 10% inventory to stay above what we could challenge with Chapter 40B. That's critical. I don't have to be 50% above the 10% level. I just have to be above 10%. So why do I want to hamstring the council? Well, feels good to say 20, okay, but that means we have no wiggle room. There's no buyout clauses, which, Councilor Roby, I'm in favor of. I thought the buyout clause, it wasn't doing us any favors, because you can't, $50,000, I can't build a tent, never mind build an affordable unit. So the $50 concept, and then couple that with, I don't want to be in charge of having to build those affordable units as a city entity. We would fail miserably on that particular task. So staying above that 10% affordable housing limit, I believe, is extremely important. So the challenge with the current ordinance to allow the buyout, it did not adhere to the 15%. So we had 15% in the ordinance right now, but we let people buy out because we had some wiggle room, which was good. But I think that started frustrating councils, one, and two, it wasn't universally applied throughout the city. We gave hall passes to mixed-use development in downtown, go on and on. So I understand that frustration. So I would offer to Urban Affairs consideration of some changes that I believe would support the goal of staying above 10%. Now, you may all have your own different goals, which is fine. But remember, this body and future bodies are going to be the ones deciding it, and there's no wiggle room in what's currently proposed for us right now. It's flat out 20, all right? In my opinion, that is just too high, all right? So I've given you a potential change, and I will acknowledge a couple things right up front. The veto is upheld. We go back to start from scratch again. And again, that's not a bad thing, all right? We want to get it right. Eliminate the buyout. I agree, Councilor Roby, the buyout, not so good. So then it crossed my mind, well, what about the projects we've got currently on the books? And you have before you some input from the solicitor. McGee Farms isn't really an issue because that's got 20% built in anyway, so that would, in essence, meet the new requirement. But 28 South Bolton Street, which everyone wants to see something built down on Main Street, if we now end up telling this particular individual he's now got to put 20% affordable, ooh, because they're not banking on that right now. Eon Main, 57 Main Street, Lincoln Mechanic, 272 Lincoln. So the solicitor knows, doesn't have the exact answer, but I'm reading this as this would apply. And these are people that we've already approved. Now, we can change the wording, but we can't, because this is what's before us. We got the order. It's either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's not a we can change it. Yes, we can change it, but we have to uphold the veto and then start the process over again, which again is okay. There is no time limit. So I've put together what I think would be a compromise that I think meets the goal of 10%. But again, I am a little concerned that if we hold to the 12% number versus the 20, we will always be above 10% going forward. For every project that comes before the city, it's universally applied, it's simple. Pick a different number if you want a different number. Keep it at 10. Our problem has been we haven't been good about it, and we've let some projects slide and some buy some others out. So I would encourage the councilors to do that similar soul searching that I did with the veto. I do take them seriously. I hope you'll consider what I've given before you when it comes time to make that decision, to vote on whether you support the veto or not next Monday. And I'm happy to take any questions, Madam Chair, should councilors have any.
So I guess I would like clarification. When you say uphold the veto, you're saying that we say we vote to override the veto, is how I would word it. So if we vote to override the veto, then the language that we have is will then be on the books.
That's correct.
All right, so we don't start over. We have valid ordinance that's been approved by the council.
If the veto's overridden. If you like those, based on what you have heard, if you think 20% is the right number, which I'm hoping you don't after what you've heard tonight, and start thinking about what our hands are tied. Oh, so you can say, okay, we can have it and then change it a little later on down the pike. Okay, but I'm gonna go back to these projects. These projects are potentially impacted, and they may not be financially viable. Everybody wants 28 South Bolton Street. If the gentleman that owns it finds out he's now got to have those 36 units, 20% of them now have to be affordable. He may not go forward. I didn't ask him, but you've seen the developers come before us and argue why 10% is too much. I'll guarantee you when they hit 20%, that's going to be twice as much consternation.
And I guess for me, that's the part that I believe is still unclear, because I think once we do a site plan, what is in that language of the site plan or a special permit for 28 South Bolton is what's in effect. So South Bolton, we gave them an extension. They pulled a demolition. My understanding is they are now moving forward, and the existing special permit, which says nothing about affordables, is what will play for that piece of property. Eon Main, I think that one's done. Somebody's got to start all over again. So is that an issue? Maybe. So I think the fact that we're changing this, if it was last week, next month, next year, the issue to me is downtown Marlborough Village was a mistake not to include the affordable from day one. And I think that the council agreed with that when we went through this whole discussion. We had lots and lots of iterations. You didn't agree with mine, we compromised, we came up with what we have. So I guess if in fact people want 12 or something else, then yes, we've got to start from scratch. So we have to start this whole process all over again. Refer to the planning board, refer to urban affairs, have public hearings to make one simple change to what Councilor Austin wants it to change it to 12% across the board. There's got to be a way to be able to get to that easier than starting from scratch, because there's a whole nother set of changes on the table that could make that change if that is what people want. So I think I'm going to go around the room. I saw Councilor Doucette. If anybody has
Thank you very much,
statements, where are we?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I understand what Councilor Ossing's concerns are. I think that what we did here was a lot of solid work. I think eliminating the buyout was a critical piece to get this done. You know, the issue that I see with this is, okay, this is a change. To make the change, we have to follow the process in the same way that basically if we passed this and we wanted to make that same change, we would have passed this and then run through that same process again. You know, as you were saying, you know, that's the way it goes. You know, I got no problems following process if that's the proper process to go. So I don't have any problems with that to make this a better solution. You know, I think, Mayor, you talked about having something for the MBTA thing for the next meeting. We talking tomorrow's agenda packet? Okay, I just wanted to make sure which tomorrow,
We have a
next one.
meeting next week with the consultant that we brought in. The maps are drawn, the solicitor's tweaking the language that we're using as far as what's buildable, and, you know, you start getting into height and setbacks and everything, so we're trying to piggyback off of something that exists in the city as opposed to recreating the wheel, so we're pretty close. You know, I think, and that's kind of a separate issue than this. That's going to include now some affordable housing that was never the intent of the governor, and he and I had discussions on it 4 years ago, 5 years ago when it was first proposed. And I said, you know, talked to the governor and lieutenant governor and told them both, this is never what's going to get through the legislature, ever. No, they're working on it. And it took them 2 or 3 years to get it done. And last minute, they slipped in, it was supposed to be workforce housing, and last minute, they slipped in the affordable component and started tweaking it a little bit. It was just a bad idea to move forward with a housing bill tied into the MBTA. We don't get the services we should get, but we're locked into what they want. So we're gonna live with it, we're gonna work it so it doesn't affect our city too much. And the only other point the 2 points I want to make that I forgot was, one, I'm not looking to be the affordable housing magnet of the state. Because we have them available, I have people moving in from all over. Same thing we have in our Section 8 housing or our senior housing right now. I can't give it to the Marlborough person. They have to apply on the list with the state, and we got to go down the list and, you know, hopefully get to some Marlborough people. But, you know, it's great if we have extra units, but I want to take care of the 43,000 people that are here first. And I know one of the questions that always comes up was, why don't you build more senior housing and affordable housing? Well, Hudson's going through it right now. They own the property, they own the building, and they're going to spend $425,000 per unit to build affordable housing, because of all the restrictions and criteria that are put in by the state when you build these. I wanted to go up on I wanted to actually raise Pleasant Street for the senior housing, raise the whole thing, redesign it so we'd have better parking, go up another floor so we could add 10 or 12 units, and the state basically told me, that's a different pot of money, and we're only giving you rehab money. So we spent $8 million to do 40 units to rehab paint on a pig, as opposed to spending, you know, a reasonable amount to redo the entire complex. But when people are spending $425,000 for a unit, you know, and some communities are saying, well, even Hudson, the state's giving us the money, so we're okay. It's like, I just have a problem spending that kind of money, of the state money or city money or federal money. It's coming out of our pockets, and it's a lot of money because of the red tape. It needs to be fixed, but it can't be fixed here.
Can I
Do you have other questions?
Yeah, well, I just want to make a comment about what the mayor was saying. You know, I understand Marlborough, you may consider Marlborough a magnet for affordable housing. On the other hand, people that I work with, you know, basic lower income, minimum wage type, they're having a hard time, you know, living and working in the city. I know a lot of people that end up moving out of Marlborough to like Fitchburg or something like that, and because of the commute that they have, they end up finding another job there. The result is that, you know, the businesses around here have a hard time attracting people with low income wages. So it's, you know, there's multiple dimensions to this issue as far as what affordable housing really means and how do we actually do it. So I think this is probably, yeah, one of the most critical issues that is confronting us as a municipality, as well as all the others. And there are different perspectives of what's going on. But, you know, making it so that someone can earn, some reasonable wage and actually live close to where they work is becoming harder and harder to do. And there's a lot of jobs being, opening in Marlborough. A lot of them are not high-paying jobs. I'm not talking about the Boston Scientific. I'm talking about Market 32 and all those jobs. A lot of people I know work multiple part-time, minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet, and multiple family members are doing that just to make sure the household stays in Marlborough. So this is a critical issue to make sure that something is affordable. I'd like to see what the mayor sends down, because I think it's going to have an impact on what this is going to be, one way or another. If this comes up to a vote at the next meeting, then it's either going to be, we're going to override it, in which case we may have to go tweak it, or when the mayor, if we vote, if we don't get the votes to support the override, then we have to start all over again. But in any case, we still should be waiting for what the mayor sends down.
And
that's
I guess
my view.
I might be wrong, but it's my understanding that the 3A districts that cities and towns are required to produce if they're an MBTA community don't have to have affordable. They can, but they don't have to.
That's correct.
So we could say.
But some of the consultants, in fact, MAPC wouldn't work with us unless we said we were gonna put affordables in the agreement. So we told them we didn't wanna work with them either, so we went somewhere else. And we're gonna put the affordables in there, but I wasn't gonna be told by the consultant that we were hiring what we were gonna do for the city of Marlborough, so.
And I'm glad that it is in there. I'm a little concerned about the process, but having it before us, I think will be nice, but it will be, my understanding, it will be a very specific location, and if it's only in there that is the 10%, then my concern, well, if we go back to what we have, or we decide to make changes. Does anybody else have questions, comments?
I have a quick question through the chair and ask the mayor. What is your timetable of getting something? It sounded like it was the next meeting, but it really isn't.
Two different things, but the MBTA zoning, I anticipate coming down not Monday night, but the meeting right after that.
So
What's that, May?
22nd.
May what?
Oh, that's right, we still. All right, did you have any other questions?
No,
Councilor Landers? Anybody else questions, comments? Councilor Croman?
I'm happy to give some comments and questions, but I don't know if you wanted to go to Urban Affairs members first.
Urban Affairs members?
Okay. Just giving deference. I want to appreciate, all the comments that have been indicated and the proposal from Councilor Ossing and the original submission from Councilor Roby and the comments that you shared. One of the things that is, to Councilor Doucette's point, how critical of an issue the housing crisis really is statewide, is the piece that he hit on that I was really thinking about, of how people can work in this city and live in this city. Even today, I was at a business talking to somebody, and she said she lives in Worcester, right? And we heard Fitchburg, Clinton. People cannot afford to work in this city and then to also live here. And I know I saw something that Framingham did pretty recently. I believe they have a 13% affordable that they just passed, and 2% has to be what they call very affordable housing, where it has to be for earners that have below the 60% area median income. And so I think for me to lower the amount that we put forward, I would want to see an amount reserved for people who are in a lower income bracket, because I am concerned that, we talk about all these new jobs that are coming in the city. It's exciting. We have these businesses, and not all of them are these high-paying jobs that people can, afford to buy in this market, which is really high. I mean, I see houses on this market, $600,000, up to $1 million, depending on where you are in this city. And I just think that's not sustainable. So if we want people to also be able to live here, rental is one of the options that they have. And I think that, I understand that it could make some of the other units higher, so that's why I'm willing to say I'd go lower than the 20, but not without that reserved amount for people who are in that income bracket. And I know you mentioned how people might be attracted here because of the affordable housing. Well, they're attracted here for so many different reasons, right? And we want to have a very robust city that has a diverse set of income levels in it. And so I wouldn't want that to be a deterrent for people to move here. So that's just something that I'm really keeping in mind. And I know, usually with the household income, you don't want to spend more than a third of your income on rent. And so some of the rents that we see, even with the 1,800, right, you'd have to make over $65,000, and that's for a studio as one person, not like with a family or if someone's a single parent. So I just, even for all of us have probably heard of residents who've been priced out of the city, and I know people in my own generation who've bought in other communities because they want to work in Marlborough, but they can't live here, and so they're commuting. And I just think we're going to see more of that. And so, I'm really glad that we're having this discussion because it is a critical issue that every community is facing. And, I'm not sure always what the answer is, but I think we need to be mindful of all of the income levels that should be able to live here and have a successful quality of life.
Councilor Orm, do you have questions, comments? I'm just going to go.
You can go to them first if you want.
All right. Sorry, Councilor Irish. Oh.
Sorry.
Oh. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and President Ossing. One of the components I know President Ossing mentioned is someone's got to pay for this, and that I did support this. And then speaking with other residents and other communities, by hiring the amount of the affordable units, these builders are going to have to now offset their profits as well. My concern is now people and residents that may not be able to qualify for affordable unit or voucher, now they may be actually getting squeezed as well. And I'm kind of concerned is that when I talk to family members that now they've lived in Marlborough for years or surrounding communities, they can't seem to find what everyone says is an affordable unit when they're not qualified for that because they get pretty good jobs. And that was one of the components that I'm kind of concerned of, and I know President Ossing mentioned, because at the end of the day, someone does pay for it. And I know the whole component of affordable units and housing is very complex. It's very faceted in different mechanisms that get applied to it. And I do support the mayor when we do not want to be taken advantage of because we want to supply housing for all our residents. With that said, I do support the measures that President Ossing put forward, and I do thank him as well for opening my eyes to a couple of things on it because I did support this measure, and as well with the buyout. I wasn't so keen on the buyout, so that's why I did support this, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Landers, did you have more questions?
I think, no, I was going to have a comment, but I don't think I want to get into it, but I hate to blame the pandemic for everything. But I'm always questioning people of where they're working, how much they're making. And you're right, Counselor. The people down the gas station down on Main Street, they're all coming in from Leominster in that area. But a lot of them are college kids. In fact, that I come to find out, the guy that owns that gas station is from Leominster. I didn't know that at the time. So I don't know. You see it, Dave, Counselor, more than I do. You see them, your co-workers down at Home Depot and everything. But some of these people working for lower wages than they could get elsewhere. I don't know. I mean, but that's an altogether, that shouldn't even be brought up here but affordable housing is, I'd like to think that, people that wanted to live in Marlborough could, but, now you gotta look at the rents high. But are we gonna get back into a discussion, another discussion?
A discussion of...
Are we gonna vote on anything Monday night, Madam Chair?
Monday, yes, we will be voting on the mayor's veto.
Veto, okay.
So if no one else, I'm going to go for anybody who has not spoken yet. We'll go back to Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a question about process. It has to be voted out of this committee for us to vote on Monday?
No, the committee can make no recommendation. I can do
But if we table it, does it get tabled?
I'm sorry?
If we table the order, does it get voted on Monday?
Yes, it's on the agenda. I mean, it got referred to
regardless of
us
what
for
goes on
discussion, but
here-
it's still
Madam
Councilor
Chair?
Ossing.
It's just a point of order, just to understand.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So just, this was referred just to be able to hear the mayor's insights on the veto. There's no requirement. What we'll have on the agenda on Monday evening is a vote to either uphold the veto or override the veto.
So we can't hold it in committee, no matter what, it's going to go.
Well, you can, I mean, there's no time. If we keep in committee, then we just would Monday night say we're going to postpone the vote on the veto till some other date. I mean, that's it. Again,
Okay,
we're
but
not.
that would have to
under-
be done at the council. I'm sorry for interrupting, but
We're not under a time restraint. That's why it's important that we get it right versus just doing something to say we did something.
right, I understand. Thank you.
And I guess I will say that the good thing that I see about letting the mayor's veto stand and starting over, sort of, I mean, we pretty much have the language we want with a change of the number of units, which I can support that, but I think there's that second step that's already been on the agenda and also referred to committee that I think would cover the piece that Councilor Perlman brought up. And I know I didn't make copies for people, but in the last, I don't remember if it was last weekend or the weekend before, there were two little ads, one from Maloney Properties for the city of Dedham, where they were advertising 6 units at 80% of AMI, and one from Mattapan and Dorchester, where they were advertising, they had 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms and studios at 60% AMI. So I think that's the piece that we need to talk about. If we go to 12, do we say, okay, of those 12, now we want 2% of those to be at a lower AMI, so that we are helping the people who I think need affordable. That misnomer of what's affordable to you isn't affordable to me. So we can have kind of, and then come back with one complete package. So I'm okay with that if that seems to be where everybody's going. Councilor Perlman?
Yeah, I want to just kind of follow up on something that you mentioned, Chair Roby, just because I will circulate this article I found that was pretty recent from Framingham, where they said that the city originally wanted to have the 15%, but that they moved to 13 with that 2% mandate for the very affordable, particularly to remain attractive to developers, but also still address people at this income level. So I really do think that that has to be part of the conversation. I don't know, procedurally what needs to happen to make sure that that's included, but I want to make sure that they think they were trying to address people who work in restaurants and people who are trying to be first responders and other professions where, the 80%, I mean, it honestly is still very high, in terms of the income levels. I think many people would not be able to afford that if they didn't have, a home that they already live in. So I just wanted to make sure that that was in the conversation because we don't want those folks not to have a place here in the city.
And I will also point out, in the language that was not changed is a local preference. The development shall provide all legally permissible efforts shall be made to provide 70% of the affordable dwelling units to eligible residents of the city of Marlborough. Now, it's probably been years since we've had anybody get a project approved with affordable, so I don't know what they did. I know what they're doing because we did the LIP program at the Green District, but to me, that's a whole separate piece. I don't want to do LIP programs for everybody. I want it to just be in the code so that if you're going to come in for a special permit, you got to do this. And I don't know how that worked.
One last point, because I know you're trying to get that group of people that, really has income limits and not making large money, but keep in mind that this is a program, but Section 8 is a different program, and we have a ton of those in the city of Marlborough. And those are the ones that some of the landlords are really taking advantage of because, not because they're putting out lousy units, but they're getting more money than the average person would pay on the street. So, you know, John goes down there and wants to rent the unit, it's $2,500. The landlord holds out for the Section 8 because they can get $2,700. They're the ones that are only paying 30% of their income toward their housing. No matter what the apartment cost is, they only pay up to 30% of their income. So there's mechanisms in place through the state to take care of a large majority of those people. And if you say there's 5 left in Marlborough we have to house, that may be nice, but I can't guarantee with a local preference those 5 are gonna get the units. I might end up with 5 people from Cambridge. So it's just, we just need to have more conversations and think it through. I'm not looking to push this thing and say, I want a freaking vote on this veto or we're pushing it through. It's nothing like that. I want to make sure it's done right the first time so we're not readdressing this in 6 months or a year. So if it stays in committee and you table it on the council floor, I believe we can do that. And the vote does not need to be taking place.
So, Madam Chair, so again, my understanding, and we'll get clarification prior to Monday night, we can keep the veto in the council's hands as long as we want. We can't vote, we can't change what's before the council. The council approved this, so it's either going to be an up or down. We're either going to override the mayor's veto and enact what the council approved, or support the mayor's veto and let this thing die and then start from scratch. And I think what you heard some really good insights tonight, which I think is some valuable things that, again, the purpose of the veto is for us to sit back and reflect, is it the right thing to do? And if we deem it not the right thing to do of passing this ordinance as is, then we uphold the veto. And I think we got the framework right there. We've heard some great things that we want to put in there. I mean, we can turn it around and have it on the agenda at the next meeting to go again. I mean, that shouldn't be what's holding us up. It's what's the right thing to do. And I think we brought some more stuff out tonight that we didn't have in front of us in the past.
Right.
And you have the authority, the next development that comes in, that should be here in 14 hours, you have the ability to say, we're not allowing you to buy it out. Simple as that. So now you get your 15% on the project. You know, so it's not like you don't have a bite at the apple. You're not getting the 20, you get more than the 12, but you have the ability to say, no, we're not going to allow the buyout.
And the mayor's
nice to get those checks today for the buyout, but...
But you're right, and I think that that's the issue, that nobody has said, no, we want that affordable. But I guess, tell me if I'm wrong, somebody with a Section 8 can go anywhere they want. If we had no affordable component in here, but we had apartment buildings being built, they could walk into that door and say, I have a Section 8, you have to take me.
Yeah.
And it's not over.
I mean, we have some vouchers for Marlborough that go elsewhere. And we have vouchers in Marlborough that come in from other communities. I mean, usually our local CDA or housing director monitors the out-of-town ones, but sometimes the out-of-town communities like to monitor their own. So even though they're in Marlborough, Worcester might say, no, we take care of our own, so, you know, Marlborough stay out of it. But all they do is all the paperwork, the regular paperwork. But in the Section 8, 30% of the income pays for the unit. We set the rates every year, and you know, we had a big discussion on it, and the problem is we had already taken the vote like this, and now we all want to change our vote on the CDA, because instead of doing 110% of the median income, which one of the members came up and said, if we do 100%, not of the median income, of the allowable rents, because we're in the Boston district, we can go anywhere from 90 to 110%. So one of the members came up with the idea, well, if we charge 110%, that gets more money for our housing department So we'll have more money to spend on our public housing units. It's like, that's a great idea. We never thought of that before. And then we had another member chirp up and say, the problem is that if you go the highest number, that's what the landlords are gonna hold out for. And the tenant's not gonna care. They're gonna come in with their Section 8, and he's gonna say it's $2,700, and they're gonna say, great, here's my voucher. Because they're only paying 30% of their income. So again, the system is broken, but we can't fix it here. But the Section 8 is it's a different animal, but they can go anywhere.
All right, Councilor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the mayor. Mayor, thanks for coming down and having this conversation. I think it's important. I kind of wish we had it when it was in committee the first time. I think that would have been helpful for, I think, a lot of us to formulate some of these opinions. Not that, we don't have the mechanism now to go back, but that would be nice. I appreciate your letter, and I appreciate everyone's comments here tonight. It is clear how convoluted solving this problem is. And your letter, which I think you put a lot of time into, still took me about 6 times to read it to try and understand what you were talking about in certain pieces, and that's definitely no hit on you. It's really more for the fact that they're all different programs and they're all different systems, right? And so you've clearly laid this out, and I appreciate you talking to it a couple of different times. When we talk about Section 8, it is a tool that that people are able to utilize, but not exactly what we're talking about here. And I think that does muddy the waters a little bit. And I think there are probably a lot of people that would hold out for that higher rent. I think there's probably also just as many landlords, unfortunately, that go, I don't want any part of it, and find ways to get out of it. And that can also cause some housing shortages at the same time. I just want, for clarification, and I think you just answered this, the next project that comes in, because sometimes we talk about this when we've got ordinance changes and when the ordinance gets filed versus when a new project comes in and who has to adhere to it, we can still put the 15% on and not allow the buyout for the next project that comes in. So by delaying this vote, we're not missing out on anything. We don't have to act on this immediately because we're not losing any of our power.
I believe the 15% is in place, but we can verify that in the morning with the solicitor, but I believe the 15% is in place. It's your prerogative whether you waive it or whether you accept money for it or what you do. Yep. But that's in place today.
All right. I think that's an important point for us to remember, that we're not, we don't get backed into rushing into a decision, but also at the same time, we don't want to miss out on that. On 28 South Bolton, my other question, and it says that a little bit more additional information is required to make sure we would know whether or not they would fit. We extended their site plan approval. My understanding is that approval has expired. Is that true? Wasn't it a 1-year extension? So I want to just make sure that is a little bit more clear.
I believe they can move forward.
They can move forward, but I just mean for the 12-month extension of these zoning freezes. I just want to. Okay.
And I think that was the point that I tried to make. The fact that they pulled a demolition permit and have started the process means that they are working toward the building, so they can. The fact that we only gave them a year and they didn't. There's not a building, and it doesn't look like they're doing anything, right. But my understanding is they are good to go. Was pulled. Okay. And that they do not have to have affordable.
Okay. That is, I agree with Councilor Ossing. I think that's a very important point. We all want to see that happen. That's a smaller development, and we do not want to see that one tip the balance. So, I do think that there is some value in continuing this conversation as long as we are trying to kind of move forward in a progressive way to try and solve some of this issue. No one's going to solve all of this issue with the swing of the bat, as the mayor pointed out. If so, there wouldn't be a broken system for 40 years. So, I'm willing to take another look at this, but I do think that some of the progress that was decided in committee and by the full council, should be made.
I personally would suggest that we just take this out of I can report this out with no recommendation from the committee. We can continue the discussion if anybody feels like they want to on Monday when it's actually on the agenda for the vote. I will make it clear, at least to the public, that the fact that we potentially are going to override or going to sustain the mayor's veto doesn't mean that this isn't coming back, and that we'll be working on changes. So did I see a hand somewhere? Councilor Orem?
I figured I'd add my comments as well. Section 8, I know I was working with a relative, and he was told it was a 2-year wait. I believe that hasn't changed any. That was only a year or two.
I don't know if you're talking about Section 8 so senior housing, because there's a wait for both.
Yes.
We give out so many vouchers for Section 8. So it's kind of regulated by the state on what and how many and everything else. So again,
yeah.
I push it back to the state and say, we need to fix this.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just the senior housing, again, same issue. We're always looking for units. I regularly get calls from Marlborough residents that, you know, have finally decided they want to go in senior housing. It's like, well, go to Boston and get on the list.
Yeah, and that's...
And so that one is very, very frustrating for me. Up until, I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago, we could get a Marlborough person in. They had absolute preference. So we would be able to, you know, it's like, I don't know who you are. Well, I've lived here for 20 years. All right. And we try to verify they've been here for 20 years and we get them in. We can't do that anymore. And it's frustrating when you have someone, you know, that you know has been here all their life. You know, I tell people all the time, get down and get on the list. Because you can, I believe you can reject it the first time, you can't reject it the second time. But get on the list. You know, it's not gonna hurt to get on there.
Yeah, no, and
well, I don't wanna move out of my house. Well, get on the list now, because maybe the time comes in 6 months and a unit comes up. But it's very limited, it's very costly to build these things. It's a different part of money than the $8 million we spent on Pleasant Street, but it needs to be addressed statewide.
And
a lot of their regulations are controlled by the federal government. Yeah. It's like, you know what, just give us the guidelines for a program and stay out of it. But that's not what we get.
And as you said, you do get preference. You can name the town or city that you would like to go to. But you're right, it goes to a state list and it's 2+ years. It's been 2+ years for the person I know. It's sad, you know, that our own seniors cannot get into affordable housing.
That's
and
my
again,
problem.
I'm not blaming Marlborough. I'm just saying it goes to the state, so there's no way to change things, I guess. But at the same time, it keeps our residents who are seniors from finding more affordable. And that, if they could find affordable housing downsized, I brought this up when I think you were a counselor, it would open up more housing to people to have available. Right now, there's minimal housing. But I know this is not the subject matter, but I wanted to bring that up because I heard
we could go all night
housing.
on this. It's
yeah.
that,
we
there's
really
so many
could.
variables in this, it's really difficult.
I went to a Mass Municipal Conference, you were at that, Mr. Mayor, as well, and they did have, I think Council Perlman and I were at the same session on affordable housing. It's not just in Marlborough. These ordeals are happening everywhere, trying to figure out the best solution, 15%, 12%, whatever it may be. I like the idea maybe of what Framingham's doing. I'd like to see that ordinance now, they're a city, and see what they're doing, because that seems pretty reasonable too. So personally, I gained more information tonight from all my fellows, and at the same time, I will see how the council feels it out, but we have options. We can table it, wait for the MBTA review to come through. And then I'd like to see that before I make an educated vote on the proposal to be vetoed or not, and see what they say. And again, unfortunately, we're dealing with the cost of housing. It's not cheap to build housing. Might it be affordable? As mentioned at the MMA conference, they also want us to say it can be called low income, but now it can be called middle income, because it's a sign of the times. Middle income is having trouble getting into housing. So that was one of the key points they made at that conference. And I think the town of Salem, or city of Salem is reviewing issues as well on housing, because they were some of the sponsors at the meeting I went to. But at our next meeting, I I would be in favor of either tabling until we get more information, there's no deadline, or see if there's another solution to this. But obviously, this is what was proposed, I thought was reasonable, but I'd like to see the numbers. I'd like to talk to some developers, or if you have numbers, Mr. Mayor, to show me that the developers aren't making a decent rate of profit. You know, how much profit are they making? You know,
That we'll never know, Counselor.
and you know what, that concerns me as a counselor. That's why I make the decisions I make here, because they don't tell us that. And, oh, this won't work if we don't have 180 units. How much profit is in this for them, too? You know, are they helping us with the affordable housing? I don't think so. So that's why I'm not overly concerned, because they won't disclose how much profit they are making. If they're building a $5 million project, are they pulling in $2.5 million? We don't know, but maybe we can find out somehow, you know, because I think a lot of my decisions are not about corporate greed. It's about what's best for Marlborough, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, so Urban Affairs Committee members, is there consensus that I would just report this out with no recommendation? Do you feel like you really want to take a vote on it, or is consensus work? And then we'll see what happens Monday at the City Council meeting for the vote. If it is, the veto is upheld, we can not start from scratch. We have our basis, but be prepared for something back on the agenda and no. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't think we start from scratch. We have a baseline to work from, and that's fine with me. But motion to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there a vote? We are missing a member, but we are adjourned at 9:09.